Welcome to the Bill Walton Show, featuring conversations with leaders, entrepreneurs, artists, and thinkers. Fresh perspectives on money, culture, politics, and human flourishing. Interesting people, interesting things.
Welcome to the Bill Walton Show. I'm Bill Walton. I'm back today with my great friend and brilliant economist, Steve Moore, and we're following up with the conversation we had last month about this catastrophe, the reconciliation bill that's rolling through Washington and threatens to upend all the economic progress we've made in the last 30, 40 years, plus instituting all sorts of permanent programs which will, I think, enslave Americans in a dependency of government control far beyond where we are today. So, with that as an opening, Steve, am I hyperventilating?
No, you're understating the issue. Look, I said it a month ago on your show. I want to say it again. This is our Dunkirk moment. We are on the beaches. We need reinforcements. The left is surrounding us. They have control. They own Washington right now. They have the White House. They have the Senate. They have the House. They're trying to bulldoze the most left-wing agenda in the history of the United States through Congress, with a 1-seat majority in the Senate and a 5-seat majority in the House of Representatives. This bill, and by the way, do not call it a $3.5 trillion spending bill, folks. This is $5 trillion on top of the $2 trillion they spent earlier this year, on top of the $6 trillion budget that they are passing, and on top of the fraud $1 trillion infrastructure bill. You add it up, we're talking, Bill, about in 1 year, Congress authorizing $12 trillion of spending, which is more money than the United States government spent to finance the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War I, World War II, the moon landing, the transcontinental railroad, and the interstate highway system. That's how much they're talking about here. I don't want to go on too much. We can get into the details, but I will tell you this. Every single crazy lunatic idea the left has been peddling for the last 30 years is included in this bill. Whether it's modern monetary theory, where they can just borrow ad infinitum, whether it is critical race theory, whether it is the pro-abortion movement, whether it is the idea that we can raise tax rates through the roof. Every idea they have, they are shoving down our throats in this bill. Green New Deal is all there. We have to stop it. This is our Dunkirk moment. If we lose this, we're going to spend the next 30 years of our lives trying to undo the damage this bill would do.
Well, and the thing that's really galling is if you look at, say, FDR's New Deal in the 30s, it took him 2 terms to get that through, and he had massive majorities in Congress,
Exactly.
and it was all out there, and everybody agreed this
Right.
was the social consensus. Johnson, Great Society, took about 2 years to put in place, 2-3 years. He also had an overwhelming majority in
Right.
Congress, and it was all out there. Everybody talked about it. It was properly. I mean, they were filled with terrible ideas, but at least most of America agreed with it. This thing, is it 5,000 pages now or 10,000 pages?
We
Or
don't know. That's the other thing. They're not telling us what's in the bill.
And they're giving us a week or two.
Do you remember what Nancy Pelosi said about Obamacare?
Yeah.
You know, we'll read it after we pass it.
Yeah.
That's exactly their strategy here. If they're so proud of this bill, if it's so transformative, if it's what the American people want, why are they keeping it top secret? Why is it so confidential?
So explain the state of play with the reconciliation bill. This is a budget item.
Okay.
This is a budget bill, and I know a little bit enough to be dangerous.
Yeah.
The budget should be about money, taxing and spending.
Right.
But as you point out, they've also dumped the kitchen sink into this thing.
That's
Everything, every social agenda they've had goes into this reconciliation bill. So what's the process for the reconciliation bill, and how would this become law?
So that's a great question, and these are complicated rules. I'll try to really simplify.
It's mind-boggling.
The most important thing for people to understand is that under the reconciliation process, that you can pass a bill with only 51 votes, not the required 60 that it normally takes.
51 votes in the Senate.
Right, and a majority in the House. So what the Democrats have done is basically said every crazy idea that they have that no Republican in their right mind would vote for, they're going to stuff it in this reconciliation bill. That's the Green New Deal. That's the modern monetary theory. That's the critical race theory. That is the massive increases in taxes, biggest tax increase since Jimmy Carter was in office. All of these things are being stuck in this bill, and the Democrats believe that they can pass this with 51 votes. Now, here is the snag for them. They want to put their, their steal election bills in this. They want to put things like, Washington, D.C. statehood in this bill. They want to put in getting rid of their big labor bill that would get rid of state right to work laws. They want to shove this all in the bill. Some of that is going to be ruled out of order. So the Senate, quote, parliamentarian already has said they cannot put their amnesty bill. They wanted to put amnesty in this bill. And thankfully, the Senate parliamentarian said, no, you can't do that. So there are going to be decisions made about what they can put in and are going to be left out of this bill. Bottom line, though, is there's nothing to stop the Democrats. The Republicans, if every Republican votes no, which God willing will happen, if Nancy Pelosi can get every Democrat in the House, and if Chuck Schumer can get every Democrat in the Senate, they're going to do this. Now, I'm going to make one other quick point. You brought up the New Deal. The American people, rightly or wrongly, they voted for the New Deal, right? I mean, there were massive majorities for the Democrats.
Yeah, Democrats
had
about
right.
3/4 of Congress.
Exactly. There was a voter mandate for the New Deal. There's no mandate for this. Yeah. This isn't what the American people, voted for. Joe Biden said 100 times during the campaign, I'm not Bernie Sanders. I'm not going to pass the Bernie Sanders agenda. You know what? This is to the left of the Bernie Sanders agenda. I mean, my God, Joe Biden is making, Barack Obama look like Ronald Reagan in comparison.
So what kind of time do we have? As I understand it, the reconciliation bill's in the House passes the spending bill.
Right.
They send it over to the Senate.
That's right.
And that's where the 51 votes really matter.
That's right.
And so is there a conference now that the Senate and the House are talking?
They haven't gotten it through. So there's so many moving parts to this. That's the other thing.
And the other thing I want to add,
there's the infrastructure
the reason
bill.
we're doing this show is you look in the papers, this is not being reported.
It's not being reported because nobody understands it. They don't want people to understand it. So we have the $1 trillion sham infrastructure bill, which is basically the Green New Deal, which unfortunately 19 Senate Republicans voted for that. I'm still ashamed of those people who would vote for a Green New Deal. Then they have to pass a normal budget, to finance our national security and our roads and our bridges and our court system. That's going to be $6.5 trillion. And then they want to pass this $5 trillion, what I call the Great Society Part 2, because Great Society Part 1 was such a great success, right? The war on poverty, which poverty won. And so it is massive in size. It is massive in terms of its effect. Look, Biden said it very clearly. This is meant to transform America. It is a radical redistribution of income. It is big government socialism. It is the Joe Biden AOC dream plan. And I believe we can beat this, though. Here's the thing. I think that there are enough Democrats. All you need is 5 or 6 Democrats in the House, and all you need is one Democrat in the Senate, whether it's Joe Manchin or Kristen Sinema or Warner in Virginia. One of them to say, this is insane. This is going to bankrupt our country. We can't do this. Now, Joe Manchin, who has said something really important, Bill, he said, let's have a strategic pause. I love that idea. Yes, a strategic pause. What is the rush to get this thing done? The economy is
I'll tell you what the rush is. The rush is they want to get this done before the 22 elections.
Exactly.
And Manchin's strategic pause is, why don't we wait until after the 2022 elections? That's the last thing they want. They want to get this thing done before the voters can speak.
Time is on our side.
If we can delay.
What?
If we can delay.
Yes. And I'll just give you one example of a way to delay this bill. Read the damn bill. Read it. This is going to be somewhere around 5,000, maybe 10,000 pages long. Bill, when is the last time you read a 5,000-page book? Right? I mean, come on. It's just if we require,
my secret's out.
Mitch McConnell could go to the Senate floor and say, I want this bill read on the Senate floor. Well, that would probably take 2 or 3 weeks, 24/7, just reading the thing.
Does he have the power to do that?
He could, yeah.
The thing that would do is it would shine a light on what's going on in here, because they're rushing all this stuff through and they don't want a light shown on it.
Right.
Now,
and by the way, if this goes into 2022, it's not going to happen. Do you think these Democrats want to vote for the biggest tax increase and the biggest debt increase in the history of America in an election year? I mean, they would lose 50 seats. They may do that anyway. But this is very perilous. I tell you, my sources on Capitol Hill are telling me that these 25 Democrats who are in Republican districts, these are mostly suburban districts, They are getting very nervous about this. And so I do believe we can defeat this bill. But the conservative movement has to come together.
Well, that's why we're doing
we
this.
Have to come together.
Well, that's why we're doing this. We're going to
by the
talk
way, every group that's part of your coalition, at
Council for
CMP,
National Policy,
CAP, every coalition, whether you're a pro-life group, pro-gun group, pro-election integrity group, whether you believe in human rights, whatever your issue is, it is under assault in this. If you're a right-to-work group, this gets rid of right-to-work laws in 26 states. I memean, folks, you cannot believe how horrific this bill is.
So, is this all or nothing? I mean, is it, for example, the voting bill, Joe Manchin had some improvements to the voting bill, and even after his quote improvements, it's still terrible.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's a great point. Our line has to be the right amount of money to spend on this bill is zero.
Right.
Zero.
Yeah.
Now, Joe Manchin says, well, I won't vote for a $3.5 trillion bill. Does that mean he'll vote for a $3.0 trillion bill? Or a $2.5 trillion bill? Or $1.5 trillion bill? We've already spent $6 trillion on COVID, much of that under Trump. The economy is improving. There is no need to do this. Why do we want to massively? I'll give you another example. You were an employer. This bill would put in place for the first time paid parental leave policy for employers. Small businesses can't afford that.
Is there any employment cap on that? Is like 100 employees?
Yes,
even so, it doesn't matter.
Who knows? Exactly. I mean, they'll change it. And the point is, that's going to lead to higher unemployment. The tax increases. The death tax goes to 40% on anything that you want to leave to your children. If you're a successful businessman or woman, it is assault against family-owned businesses. It is. I don't even understand the logic of it, frankly. The biggest beneficiary of this bill is China. By far. China is going to dance around a jig in Beijing if the American Congress is stupid enough to pass this bill. The higher tax rate. We would have higher tax rates in the United States than China does, which is a communist country, if we pass this bill.
Well, yeah, you and I worked hard to get the corporate rates down.
Exactly.
We made the U.S. competitive. We made us investable.
Exactly.
The economy took off, and lo and behold, here we are. We want to go back to where we were before. You're watching the Bill Walton Show. I'm here with economist Steve Moore, and we're talking about the catastrophe that is the so-called reconciliation bill moving through Congress. So, Steve, let's do some context here. We got debt. There's this whole debt ceiling going on, Kabuki Theater. And the thing that's interesting is the debt ceiling is $28.4 trillion. Yeah. Our existing debt is $28.8 trillion. So we've already blown through that in terms of the actual numbers. And GDP is only $21 or $22 trillion. Yeah. So we're looking at 130% of GDP.
That's right.
And they want to push even more spending on that.
Yes.
So as I'm looking at this $28 trillion, would this $5 trillion add to that? I mean, we're talking about
$5 trillion. I mean, over the next decade, this bill adds almost $20 trillion to our debt.
So we would be 200% debt to GDP.
And by the year 2050, which is 30 years away, so the time a child born today, when they're 30, we're talking about a debt that would reach 300% of our GDP. That's like Greece. That's like, Mexico. That's, Zimbabwe, countries that go bankrupt. And you're talking about, another way to put it is, if you have a child at home, in the next 30 years, their share of the national debt to just pay for all the spending we're doing today would be $600,000.
Wow.
$600,000. I mean, by the way, it annoys me to no ends when Joe Biden says, we have to do this for the children. For the children? Who does he think is going to pay for this?
Yeah.
You and I, we're going to be dead, Bill. We're going to be dead. It's not going to be us. It's going to be our kids and grandkids. I mean, unless you're going to live to 110 years old or whatever. I mean, it is so.
At one point, I thought that was a good idea. Now I'm not so sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not sure I want to live that long if I see our country, go down this rat hole. Show me any nation in the history of the world that has ever borrowed and spent its way to prosperity. There's never been I mean, look at the great you're a student of history. Almost every great empire was destroyed from within.
That's what happened to the Roman Empire.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're following them down that path. This is a moment we all have to come together. And this is not a time for passivism. It's a time for activism.
Well, let's
to
talk
get
about
involved, stop this bill.
our coalition. I mean, we've got lines of action here. Who've you pulled together to help fight this?
So
thing?
our group, we have it's the Committee to Unleash Prosperity, which is my group with Laffer and Steve Forbes, and then we've got
and Larry
American
Kudlow.
First-
Larry Kudlow.
And Larry Kudlow, who's
Yeah.
with American First Principles, and
Yeah.
he's like the chairman. And then we have Freedom Works, and we've got ALEC, and we've got Jim DeMint's group, Conservative Partnership. We've got CAP involved. Everybody is excited. Everybody wants to know what they can do to help. And I think the point is, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, talk to your family members, and explain to them that this is a bill that will bankrupt our country, will put at risk a financial crisis that will make what happened in 2007 and 8 look like a picnic.
Do we have a target list of? I know we've talked about the Senate. Do we have a target list in
We
the
have about
House?
20,
Because
go to our-
Pelosi's got 208 votes now, right?
Sorry?
How many votes does Pelosi have in the caucus?
She has about a 4 or 5 seat.
Well, pick a number.
Yeah.
So are there 10? Are there
so
10?
she can only afford to lose at most 5 Democrats out of 222.
Okay, so do we have a target list
Yes,
now?
we do.
Of the,
and by
of
the way, we've got a list of 25 Democrats that are in Republican districts, some of them which Trump won, that this is a very, very difficult vote for them. And we have to make it as excruciating as possible. Now, you asked about the debt ceiling. That's another part of this. They're going to, what we're saying is no Republican should vote to raise the debt ceiling. None. Zero. They own it. They're the ones who want to borrow $7-8 trillion over the next 5 years. They're the ones who are going to have to raise the debt ceiling to pay for it. Mitch McConnell is 100% right on this. You own it. You can pass the debt ceiling if you want to. Force them to put that in the reconciliation bill. So when they vote for all this spending, they also have to vote to raise the debt ceiling, because they are going to pay a high price in 22 if they do that.
Well, Schumer and they don't need the Republicans to raise the debt ceiling.
They don't.
They've already got the votes. So
This is why the Washington Post and the New York Times, they're just lying. The media is lying to people. I listen to these Democrats because sometimes I turn on MSNBC. Oh my gosh, the Republicans are trying to cause a financial crisis.
Here we go again. Yeah.
We're going to default on our debt. No, the financial crisis is the $30 trillion debt. And what kind of look, you've been in banking. Can you imagine if you've got somebody who's come in with a business and it's going bankrupt and they're spending way too much money and they've got, endless amount of, and they say, oh, will you give me another loan? And you would say, no, first show me a plan. What's your plan to get out of debt? Bill, what is the federal government, what is Congress's plan to get us out of debt? Do they have a plan?
Might be a good time for you to explain something arcane called modern monetary theory. The idea that there is no day of reckoning?
Yep.
Explain that.
The modern monetary theory, I've mentioned it several times on this show, is this crackpot idea that we can just keep, because we're the world reserve currency, we could just keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing, and foreigners are going to just keep buying our debt. Well, that's like saying, jump out of a 99th floor of a Empire State Building, and when you're at the 20th floor, you say, gee, it's going great so far. I mean, at some point you crash and you hit the ground, and then you do have that financial crisis. It will cause interest rates to rise. It will cause higher inflation, and that's the other thing. This is a president. Everything he has touched, he has contaminated, screwed up. Whether it's the catastrophe of Afghanistan, whether it's the rise of inflation, whether it's our border crisis, whether it's COVID, whether it's the national debt, all of these things. I mean, show me anything he's done right. So after they've screwed up everything, now we're going to give these people $5 trillion more money to spend?
Do you have a website that points out
Well,
who the vulnerable Democrats are?
Yeah,
and
either go to American First Principles. American First Principles, they'll go to the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. We've got those targeted people. We got to hit them hard.
How many names?
They're mostly in suburban districts.
25 names, 30?
There's about 30, actually.
Okay.
Look, I think Republicans could pick up 50 seats in the House next year. That's what happened in 94. That's what happened in 2010. The American people are angry. They did not sign up
But even
for
if we
this.
pick up those seats, unless we stop this, it's going to be too late to reverse a lot of these
by the way,
entitlements.
even if we take them out in 2022, if they pass this bill,
that's my
it's
point.
not going to matter.
Yeah. So we got to act now.
Yeah.
So also, I mean, just to energize people, what do we have in here? Paid parental leave, you mentioned. We've got essentially a continuing takeover of the healthcare system. We got a climate bill built in here.
I didn't even mention that. Thank you for bringing that up. Remember, Obamacare was, the first stone to get over the river towards socialized medicine. This is the next step. This will put tens of millions of more Americans under the government healthcare system. It will destroy private insurance, which is exactly what they want. And then you've got another thing, Bill, that I didn't mention. What about the entitlement? The fact that they're vastly expanding the welfare state, and they're getting rid of all of the bipartisan welfare reforms we did back in the 1990s. No work requirements, no school requirements, no even looking for work requirements, no time limits on this stuff. Everybody's just going to, look, free healthcare, free childcare, free pre-kindergarten. You don't have to pay your student loans, free community college, free food. We're going to expand, the food stamp program. You don't have to pay your rent, by the way. I mean, this is insane. This is treating like we're going to have half of Americans basically dependent on government. And I don't know how you feel about it, Bill, because I'm always asked, are they doing this intentionally to make Americans dependent on government? What do you think?
I think the answer is yes.
You do. They're that terrible. They're that awful that they want to make. I mean,
well, remember, the Democrats are the party of government.
They are.
And the more they put into the government, the more they have power, the more they can influence the outcomes they want. And yeah, I think it's a naked play to put government in charge of every aspect of life. They're buying votes. I mean, if you look at all the items in this, and this goes on for page after page, there's something for everybody here.
Right.
Like, I happen to be on Medicare. Okay, well, now I get free dental. Gee, I'd like free dental, but then also, I also think you got to pay for that. We can't afford it.
Yeah.
I mean, what they're doing, they've got a list. I don't think they've left out a constituent except maybe Donald Trump.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Medicare, because Medicare, as you know, is going bankrupt, right? You know that. Everybody knows
we got
Medicare
two, 3 years left, or
it's supposed to go bankrupt. Well, start to go into the red in 2026. This bill moves it up by 2 years, because what are they doing? They're taking a bankrupt system and they're putting more people on it. They're adding more benefits to the program. So actually, if anyone watching the show, if you're on Medicare, this is a threat to the survival of that program. It's going to capsize. It's like putting more and more people on the decks of the Titanic.
More people need to know that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what's happening.
Exactly.
Okay,
And
this sounds great
know
near term.
that.
Long term, you're dead.
So this is a clear and present danger to the future of the Medicare system. Now they're saying, people over the age of 60 can get it. They're saying all sorts of new benefits, and it is going to cause massive deficits in the program, and then they're going to not be able to pay for the benefits.
Well, and we used to have the military-industrial complex. Now we've got the climate change industrial complex. This is also a big giveaway to them.
Yes.
And don't we do something?
Did you say the climate change?
Climate change.
Yes, that's a term I use all the time. There are the left, all these corporations and all these solar panel companies. And by the way, you know where the solar panels and the wind turbines are made, right?
China.
I mean, how insane is this?
China.
We're stopping building our oil. We're not producing our oil and gas and coal and nuclear power, and we're going to use solar and wind power, which, by the way, is produced in China.
Well,
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It is so crazy.
Let me amplify that. And the other thing is, this stuff doesn't degrade. It stays around for a billion years, so it's non-degradable. It's therefore very harmful to the environment, and also the amount of minerals and energy you need to extract this stuff to make the wind and solar makes it 10 times more expensive.
Are you following what's happening in Europe right now? Because Europe has gone green. And their energy prices have tripled.
Yeah.
Tripled.
Yeah.
Can you imagine what a hardship that will be for American families if your utility bills triple, if your gas price triple? And a lot of these European countries are saying, we got to get away from this green energy crap. It's not working. We got to go back to using coal and natural gas. And we're by the way, Biden just this week was at the United Nations. Instead of talking about, putting America first, and it was all about climate change and all of these international programs, that he is not an America first guy. Biden. He is not America first. He's America last.
You're making news, Steve.
Right? That's the understatement of the century, right?
It would be. Oh, by the way, let's give away the Bagram Air Force Base. Who would like that? Air base. China might like that. So we got to wrap up.
Yeah.
We go down this long list would be to make our blood boil, and I think it's already off. We're probably 400 degrees right now. What do we do? What are you recommending?
I think we have to have all hands on deck. We need activists. Every American has to speak out about this bill. The polls are showing very clearly Americans don't want this. The Democrats don't care. They don't care. They see the window slamming shut, and they're going to ram this down our throat. We have to keep the pressure on. As I said, talk to your family members, talk to your friends, talk to your colleagues, and just say, do you realize what these people are doing right now? Do you realize how much debt they are imposing on us, how these higher taxes are going to benefit all these other countries? Donate, lend your time, lend your voices, call your congressman, all these things. People think, oh, gee, if I write a letter to my congressman or call my congressman, it doesn't make a difference. It does make a difference.
A very small percentage of people can really move the needle. And
exactly.
If you're asking yourself, if you're watching this or listening and you're saying, well, gee, I really don't know about this. Is this serious? There's a news blackout. They don't want any of this reported. Right. It's the same thing as alternative to, something like ivermectin. You're not allowed to talk about that. You're not allowed to talk about certain verboten things on social media. Well, this bill has been, you really don't find much about it except if you listen to us. And it's the most, I'd say it's probably the single biggest issue we face right now.
I was watching Saving Private Ryan the other night, and, it really hit me, the courage and the bravery and the self-sacrifice of these people who stormed the beaches at Normandy. And the whole country really came together to defeat this, this hostile force. We have a hostile force right now in Washington. And this is a time for everybody to be engaged in the fight. And don't just sit back and watch, do something, get involved, activist groups. We need protests, all peaceful. We're peaceful people. They're the violent ones. Mm-hmm. But lend your voice to this and say, hell no, we're not going to let you, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and Chuck Schumer, bankrupt the greatest country on the planet Earth. We're not going to allow you to send our jobs to China and to Saudi Arabia and to these other nations. We're not going to allow you to impose massive costs on our children to fund your massive socialist fantasies. And that's what they're trying to do. And they really do regard this as their once-in-a-half-century opportunity to do it.
Give us your website.
Committee to Unleash Prosperity. Go sign up for a hotline. It gives you everyday updates, information about what they are doing. We have to force the Democrats to, there's at least 25 Democrats in the House and at least 10 Democrats in the Senate who we believe can crack. And that's all we need. We only need one or two of them, just a few of them.
Well, we've got a line of action. Yep. Steve Moore.
Okay.
Thanks. It's great. You've been watching The Bill Walton Show, listening to The Bill Walton Show with Steve Moore, economist, talking about a very, very critical matter for our country's future.
This is not a fire alarm, folks. This is not a fire drill. This is the real thing. These people are serious. They're deadly serious. This is as serious as a heart attack.
Exactly. You can, as always, stay tuned for our next episode. Next time, hopefully we'll come back we can do a victory dance next time, we hope, if we all get involved in this. You can follow the show on thebillwaltonshow.com. We're also on all the major podcast platforms. We're on YouTube and Rumble, and hope you'll continue joining us in the conversation. So thanks for participating. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Want more? Click the subscribe button or head over to thebillwaltonshow.com to choose from over 100 episodes. You can also learn more about our guest on our Interesting People page. And send us your comments. We read every one, and your thoughts help us guide the show. If it's easier for you to listen, check out our podcast page and subscribe there. In return, we'll keep you informed about what's true, what's right, and what's next. Thanks for joining.